Monday. Let's find a nice comfy seat. Something that feels like you can relax into it. Fix my audio here. There we go. Yeah, nice comfy seat. Something that's supportive. Ah, something that is supportive enough that you can trust it and you can be at ease into it. Ah, and then let's take some big full breaths. We can get just more and more trusting with the seat. Really thinking about becoming more and more trusting in our seat. More and more stable within that trust. And from that trust into the stability, into the grounding or groundedness of our seat. Let's give ourselves 40 more seconds here, just settling in. And eventually letting the eyes open if they're closed. Let's take a kind of conscious effort to retract the shoulders. So squeezing the shoulders back. And then once you feel like you've got the shoulders back fully, I'm going palms up here. I like that. It just allows me a little bit more space, but if palm down feels more comfortable for you, feel free. Let's give a rotation over towards the right or left, whatever felt appropriate for you. And then once you get fully rotated, squeeze into the core and think about pushing your head out the roof. And then let's relax back to neutral. And let the shoulder girdle relax too. And then we'll do the same thing. So it's a retraction, really conscious effort on that retraction. And then once you're fully retracted, we're going to take the rotation over to the second side. And then once you get that rotation, think about core squeeze so that you can drive the head straight up and get as tall as we possibly can be. And then we'll relax back to neutral and let the chin come down to the sternum. And with the chin tucked, give a little bit of sway to the head so that we're exploring the neck and what is possible for the neck. Maybe one more time in either direction. Before we bring our head back to neutral. Let's transition to hands and knees tabletop. a pretty good amount of head awareness here, and that's what we're looking to utilize. Let's bring that head and neck just slightly higher, like a millimeter higher than you'd normally have it. So there's just the slightest uptick there, and try to keep that as you curl your toes and roll back into down dog. So as you get back into your down dog, there's a general kind of straight down eye positioning. We want to be just a degree of angle shift in that with our head. And then come back down to hands and knees. And let's take the opposite. So we're going to shift our head that 1 degree down. So chin tucks to the sternum, just 1 degree down, and then we'll curl our toes and lift back into down dog. And just note the difference in the field of vision here. And then we'll come down to hands and knees, flip the tops of the feet and sink back into child's pose. So that subtle little shift, right, completely changes the field of vision. Obviously, the field of vision is restricted here because we can only see whatever, a foot and a half in front of us down to the mat, down to the floor. But there's a huge shift in that 1 to 2 degree angle change, or 3, I guess, if we calculate all the way through. So as we're moving through class tonight, let's really try to lock into that optimal positioning, even to the 1 degree precision. And we'll pull ourselves forward to hands and knees tabletop. From hands and knees tabletop, broaden out across the sternum, curl your toes, lift your seat, find down dog, this time with a neutral head position. And we'll walk our way forward into fold. Inhale into half lift. Exhale all the way back into fold. And slide your left foot straight back into lunge. And as you land and settle and ground, sweep yourself up into crescent. Early little visitation of crescent here. Really think about that big torso activation, that lift to neutrality. And then float the hands down to the mat. And we'll step to the front of the mat, matching our foot position. Inhale to half lift. Exhale back into fold. Let the head go. Really think about the head releasing and getting that length, and then slide your right foot straight back. Push back and activate the right quad. Think about that right leg strength, and then we sweep ourselves up to crescent. Big vertical lift as we expand through that anterior space on the right side. Eventually, hands come back down to the mat, and we step forward, finding our fold. Inhale to half lift. Exhale back into fold. Shift your awareness to your sacrum. And let's roll ourselves up, really thinking about the slow unwinding and stacking of the musculature all the way up. Yeah, beautiful. Into our top space. Really nice, Annie. And then getting your mountain pose. As we come to mountain, let's take the arms to a 90-degree bend at the elbow, palms up, like we're holding a super heavy dinner plate here. Thanksgiving turkey or tofurkey, right? It's this big effort. And then think about the bicep activation. So I don't know how I always wear a shirt that blends in, but I do. All right, so get that bicep activation and then squeeze back into the shoulder space. And hold this arm strength, hold this bicep activation, hold this forearm activation as you slide the left foot straight back. And then imagine you're holding this heavy plate and we're going to lift it up to shoulder height. So extending the arms out to shoulder height. And then we're going to use the retraction or bicep flexion to step back into mountain. And now we recreate that same stability of holding this plate. So try to really imagine that there's weight here. So the biceps are really active. And we'll do the same thing to the second side. We retract and squeeze, and then the right foot steps back. We hold that plate, and then we're lifting it up to shoulder height, really using that bicep strength. And then we bend and step to the front of the mat. Take the arms out towards cactus now and feel that fatigue. Feel the fatigue in the shoulder space, but really make sure that we get those elbows up to shoulder height. And then let's sink ourselves back into chair. So as we come back in a chair, we're really working to get the depth of the seat. So you're sitting the seat back all the way, even as we're holding this width. And then we're just going to take our way forward into fold, or allow our body to work its way forward into fold. And as you settle here, think about the upper torso, especially across the shoulder girdle, lending its space to the hips, and the hips lending their space to the hamstrings, all the way into that fold. Plant your hands. We'll walk our way back into down dog. So we repressurize with some potential shoulder fatigue, repressurize and get the weight back into the hips, then shift yourself forward to plank, and we'll lower ourselves down to our belly. Flip the tops of the feet, and let's take a traditional baby cobra. So fingers splayed out wide, hands right underneath the shoulders. Give yourself that little peel of the forehead, of the chin, away from the mat. This does not need to be as exaggerated as I made it there. This could be a millimeter, but if it feels appropriate to get that little bit of upper back bend, especially if you have some additional thoracic space from yesterday's practice, if you happen to be there, then maybe we get a little bit more arch in the upper back. Keep that elbow and bicep activation, or relative bicep activation, that we had in our standing shape. And then let's relax and slide the hands underneath the forehead for a little crocodile pose. And just relax, particularly relaxing the upper back. There's this early frontiersman who has carved out a really unique life for himself out in the middle of the forest in the upper Northeast. He's hand built a log cabin and custom fitted all of the windows and doors, and custom worked in his wood burning stove to provide warmth in the winter. And he's been living out in this forest for years alone. Give ourselves about 25 more seconds here. Just allowing the body to be at ease, and particularly focusing on relaxing the upper back and any rigidity that might be manifesting there or communicating from there. Probably more appropriate to say that. And then let's slide the hands back underneath the shoulders. We'll press ourselves up to hands and knees tabletop. From hands and knees tabletop, let's slide our left foot straight back so that we have this nice little offset space here. And then push down into the hands and activate the shoulders. Keep that neck positioning really solid and lift back into this modified version of down dog. I love this shape, but it is a confusing descriptor. It doesn't necessarily look remarkably like down dog, but it feels relatively like down dog. So once you get the weight into the left toe mound and the hands, we're going to slide our right foot forward into lunge. So just a different approach to get into lunge, and then sweep ourselves up into traditional crescent. Ground the left heel and open ourselves up into warrior two. Set your warrior two. Think about the balance on the left and right side of the shoulders. And then we're going to drop the left hand, turn the right palm up, and we're letting the left hand slide down the back leg. And we're only taking this right hand to vertical. So we're taking that straight up, really thinking about that extensive space between the fingertips and maybe maybe just between the fingertips, period. And let's come right back to warrior two. So right hand comes down, left hand comes up. Settle into the extra space in the depth of the shape. So you've created space, find that, and then spin your left heel up. And we'll find crescent once again, release the hands down to the mat, and we'll step the right foot back to down dog. Come down to hands and knees, flip the tops of the feet, and sink back into child's pose. Feel that extra space that you've created, now allowing for more depth in child's pose. And let's just take maybe another round of breath. When you've completed that round of breath with absolutely no rush to get to the completion, we're going to pull ourselves forward to hands and knees tabletop. And then we'll slide the right foot straight back so the right toe mound connects and roll back into this modified version of down dog. Get the weight into that right toe mound and into the hands, and use that to slide your left foot forward into lunge. And then sweep yourself up into crescent. Ground the right heel and open yourself into warrior two. Big, expansive. Shoulder girdles are neutral and flat. Left palm turns up. Right hand comes to the back leg. Left hand reaches straight up, really into that vertical space. And the right hand working its way down the backside of the body, trying to create and maximize the distance between the fingers here. Gets that nice lateral edge expansion. Then we come back up into warrior two. We refine the balance and sink into the extra space we've created. Right heel spins up. We find crescent, big wide version of crescent, hands come down. We'll step the left foot back into down dog. A lot of room in this down dog. Don't discredit that. Really get back into that space, and let's walk ourselves forward to the front of the mat. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Settle, release, melt here. Yeah, beautiful. Drift your awareness to your sacrum. Let's roll ourselves up once again. So we're working through this nice little fluidity on the way up. Coming into our mountain pose, and we're going to re-carry our Thanksgiving turkey or tofurkey. Big elevation to the head, strong activation of the biceps, and we're sinking back into chair, this time holding that weight in the arms. The burden of the weight is in the biceps. And then really make sure you're getting those hips back and we're not bowing in the middle of the body. Rise back up. Try to keep this 90-degree bend at the elbows and point let's see. We're lifting the arms and the palms are going to be pointed down. I don't know if I can show this any better than I am, but get that core squeeze and think about really reaching those fingertips towards the back of the room here. And then push the elbows up towards the ceiling and relax into your fold. And let that shoulder space again wash through the body so that the shoulder space translates into hip space and the hip space translates into fold space. And the fold space just gives you this release to settle into. Let's plant our hands and we'll walk ourselves back into down dog. Again, with some extra shoulder awareness. Keep that neck positioning. Overcome that desire for the neck fault here. And then let's shift forward to plank. And we'll lower ourselves down to our belly. Hands are going to slide out in front of us. So I'm going to back up so I can show. Forehead can be Gaze is straight down. So forehead can rest if that's comfortable for you. And then we're going to come up onto our fingertips and make sure you have the quads flexed so the kneecaps are lifted. And then we'll lift the tops of the feet. And think about keeping the fingertips planted and activating the biceps. So maybe even like a 3% bend at the elbows to make that happen. We're pulling back when trying to energize that upper arm musculature. And then relax. And slide your hands underneath your forehead for crocodile pose. And we can just breathe here for a moment. Just big, fluid, easy breath. So over the course of the years, this pioneer has really become a forest medic. He's dedicated himself and spent his years searching through the forest for injured, wounded, helpless creatures, and he's helped them out in any way that he can. And there are times when he is unable to help a creature that he finds out. And when that happens, he'll consume that creature. And he's really developed a unique bond with one creature, this raven, who ended up with a broken wing. And the raven is now dependent upon him to feed. So when this frontiersman brings something home that didn't make it, he always shares with the raven. Last 10 seconds here. When you're ready, let's pull ourselves forward to hands and knees tabletop. And from hands and knees tabletop, let's scroll our toes, lift our seat, roll back into down dog. Get that length and the strength from the fingertips all the way to the tailbone. And then let's walk our way forward to fold. Inhale to half lift. Exhale back to fold. Let your head go. Drift your awareness to your sacrum. Decide whether you want to roll or sweep yourself up into mountain. Hands come together at heart center. And once we establish this vertical position, let's slide our right foot straight back into lunge. And so we're really thinking about developing the strength and the kind of continuity of stability between the front and back foot here. Hands staying together, heart center. We're going to turn towards the left shoulder so that we have this nice big twist. And still trying to keep the hands relatively in line with the middle of the body. And then the biggest other kind of fault piece is that back foot. It's easy to let that roll, to really think about staying vertical there. We'll come back to neutral. Sweep and fully express crescent. And there's a ton of room in crescent. And it's coming from this anterior belly space. So we're taking this belly space and now we're transitioning that into lower leg. And then hands will drop to heart center and we will step to the front of the mat. Nice work. Settle here. Take a couple rounds of breath to let the legs be at ease. And then when you feel comfortable, we're going to do this to side two. So left foot slides straight back. We get that landing. We develop the strength and the trust in our foot position. And then we rotate towards that right shoulder. We make sure that back heel stays vertical and that back leg stays active and strong. And really think about the rotation into the belly, into the lumbar, but into the soft tissue of the belly. Eventually we'll come back to neutral, sweep the arms up, and settle into that extra space we've made where we don't need to cheat the back leg. We can just drop straight in. Then the hands drop to heart center and we return to the front of the mat. Nice work. Good kind of glute challenge, hip challenge there. Think about overcompensating or at least equally compensating with core engagement to help support the glutes and hips. And then take your arms out towards cactus. Make sure the elbow is shoulder height, and we're going to sink our way back in the chair. So just another little funky chair version. Second time we've been in this particular shape, see if the tailbone can get a little bit deeper. And then we'll just push back through the hamstrings and drop our way into this big, beautiful forward fold. Inhale the half lift. Exhale back to fold. As you come back into this fold, let the hands slide behind your legs. This can be the heels, the calves, the ankles, but grip and encourage proximity. Let's say that. I don't want to say compress the thighs and the torso here. I want you to really think about just encouraging a proximity of the torso and the thighs so that we are getting those two pieces of body as close together as we can get them. And then relax. And if you relax the grip, fine. Just relax into the fold. You don't have to relax that grip, but just relax into the fold. And then we'll release our hands down to the mat if they're not already there, and we'll walk our way back into down dog. Creating and feeling that hip space now. So we've been transitioning upper body into the hips. Now we've created some really nice hip space. Take that. And let's come down to hands and knees. And from hands and knees, we'll sink back into child's pose. Child's pose here just as a really nice opportunity to breathe and settle into the lower body space we've created. And so this forest medic, he's starting to have some thoughts about his own mortality. And he recognizes that if he goes, no one will be there to take care of the creatures. And so he takes on an apprentice, and he builds his apprentice a cabin and fits the doorways and fits the wood stove. And the two cabins sit next to one another. And now when they go out in the day, they can cover twice as much ground. They can interact with, in theory at least, twice as many animals in need. And the two of them have been working together for about a full year now, and winter is just starting to come to an end, or at least show that it may have an end in sight. Last 15 seconds here. When you're right, when you're ready, we're going to slide our hands forward if they're not already there. Use those fingerprints to pull ourselves forward to hands and knees tabletop, and then from hands and knees tabletop, curl our toes, lift our seat, and find our way back into down dog.
From your down dog shape, sail your right foot straight back and behind you into three-legged dog, and we'll step our right foot forward into lunge. As the right foot lands, let's ground our left heel and let the left hand carry us up into warrior two. So we end up in a warrior two. Now make sure you don't just settle into the warrior two that your body's accustomed to. Make sure you find your way into the warrior two that you've created thus far. And then let's take our right hand and just turn it towards the left side of the mat so that we are kind of ready to high five somebody on the left side of the mat and drop down into a little side angle. And I think we could have, so my debate there was I think we could have easily got into triangle. I think we've created enough space, but I think we can use the left hand extending forward to get that side body space without the necessity of hamstring space that we haven't really worked on. And then let's come back up into a traditional warrior two. Slide back now into the right hamstring. So we take the burden here and we really flex into that right quad and then drop your left hand and we'll turn the right palm up. And we're just going to keep that front leg straight as we reach back. And this time we can bend that right arm if it feels appropriate for you. It could be still straight up. If it feels appropriate, you can take that bend. And then we'll come back up and into warrior two. Make sure you're not soft in the hip so that the knees collapsing in. Really stay laterally active. And then left heel spins up. We find crescent. Hands come down to the mat. And we'll step the right foot back into down dog. And there is some nice asymmetry there. Let's balance that out. We'll shift our way forward to plank. Squeeze the glutes, then lift the seat back into down dog. Left leg extends straight back and behind you. And we'll step the left foot forward into lunge. Right heel grounds. Right hand takes us up into warrior two. Once again, finding the warrior two that you've created in this practice. And then let's turn the left palm to face the right side of the mat. We'll drop into our side angle. Really thinking about that top hand placement or top hand positioning, locking that in. And then we'll draw ourselves back up into warrior two. Slide, find your space again. Slide back into the left hamstring. Drop the right hand, turn the left palm up, and we're taking that arm up, left arm towards the ceiling. Elbow can bend if it feels appropriate for you. And then we're coming back into warrior two. Settle, make sure you're not loose in the hip. Right heel spins up or into crescent. Float those hands down to the mat. Step the left foot back to mirror the right. Away, wiggle, find your balance here. Eventually, we'll walk ourselves forward to the front of the mat. Inhale to half lift. Exhale back into fold. Sweep or roll yourself up into mountain. And eventually we let the hands come together at heart center. And just pause and breathe here for a moment. Just taking our time to settle in here. This will be the last standing sequence, standing shape of the practice. Think about creating the stability from the freedom that we have made for the physicality of the body. And then let's think the seat back towards chair. Handstand at heart center, seat back towards chair. And then we're going to lower down towards Malasana and eventually just extend our legs out in front of us. As the legs do extend out, let's follow them forward into a fold. And we'll just settle into a nice little fold. Remember, the knees can bend here. So I skipped that triangle because we hadn't really worked on the hamstrings much. If the hamstrings are still sticky, that is totally understandable. So remember that the knees can bend, and we don't need to be restricted by the fact that the hamstrings are restrictive. And so this pioneer works with his apprentice, and he teaches him all the principles that he's learned, and he teaches them that they're kind of the medic of the forest that are going around and they're living a different lifestyle. They've chosen a different experience than the other settlers in the area. Most people in the area are setting traps, hunting animals. They're doing the opposite. They are finding wounded animals, setting them free from traps, and taking care of them and fixing them up as best as possible. If for whatever reason their 100% efforts go unsuccessful, they'll consume any animal that passes away. But it's not the reason that they're out there. Last 15 seconds here. And when you're right, let's walk ourselves into a seat. Let's have our blanket handy. So we're going to go from shelf fold to hot dog fold, then block fold. So we end up with a rough approximation of a block. And we'll lower ourselves onto our back. And settling into this horizontal support. Really allow yourself to be received here. Kind of in the same way that we started practice with trusting the seat so that we could give way to the grounding. Here, trust the support that's underneath you much more deeply, right? There's no need to worry about staying vertical because we're already not. So can you just release into each and every exhale, like you're trying to find every bit of support underneath you. And so the course of this winter has been hard on these two forest medics and the raven that is dependent upon them. It's been an extra cold, extra bitter, extra snowy winter. And therefore, the resources have been extra stretched. All three creatures, the two men and the raven, are down in body weight and certainly undernourished. But with spring just around the corner, the two men are excited to get out and conduct their craft in the forest.
last 20 seconds here of just feeling into all of the work you've done thus far. And then when you're right, let's push down into the toe mounds and heels and slide our prop underneath the belt line here. Looking for relative balance, relative density equivalency on the left and right side. That's kind of our key. And then thinking just about settling in so that you can once again trust. And now think about the exhale, releasing the belly and dropping the lumbar. So that each exhale allows for the low back to relax just a little more intently. And so these two men go out for the first time in what feels like months. And they kind of head in a similar direction for a while and then split. And almost immediately upon splitting, the apprentice comes across a squirrel that's been trapped. And its front leg is certainly going to need to be amputated. But that's not uncommon for them. And they've seen and saved many a squirrels who've needed a leg removed. And so the two men are just far enough apart where this frontiersman can see his apprentice and see what he's found. And it makes him feel really good that they've found this squirrel in time and that this squirrel will be saved. And so he continues on throughout his day and his path. Last 15 seconds here. And when you feel right, we'll lift our belt line high enough to slide our prop out from underneath us and then release our tailbone ever so gently back down to the mat. Let's take our foot activation again, lift our belt line maybe 1 or 2 inches, and then slide our hips 1 or 2 inches to the right. And then once you slide to the right, let the tailbone come down and let both knees fall over to the left. We're looking for some hip stacking here. For me, it's always more ideal to place a prop in between the thighs when I go hip stack. So if the knees coming down together puts undue pressure on the hips, make sure that a nice little prop stack or a prop squeeze in between the thighs can be supportive for you, is available for you. And then just breathe across the sternum and shoulder girdle. So at the end of the day, these two men meet, and then they will discuss and walk back to camp. When they do meet, the apprentice has started a fire, and that only means one thing to the pioneersmen. That means that the apprentice has found an animal that just didn't make it. And he looks down on the fire and he sees a squirrel missing a leg. And he asks the question, did you come across many things? And the apprentice says, no, it's just this one squirrel. And the two men sit down and they consume this squirrel, and it nourishes them, and they feel physically stronger from it. They save the tail for the raven. Last 20 seconds here on this first side. And when you're ready, we're going to bring our knees back to neutral. If you have a prop, you can take that out. We'll bring our hips back in line. Let the bottoms of the feet come together and the knees fall out wide, just as a way to reset the hips and make sure we've found our way back to a centered position. When you are ready, knees come back to neutral. We'll push down into the toe mountains and heels, lift our belt line and slide the hips just an inch or two over to the left. And then let the knees fall over to the right. Again, you can utilize that prop in between the thighs if it is beneficial for you. And so all the while they're consuming this squirrel, the frontiersman knows that this was the squirrel the apprentice came across at the beginning of the day. And he knows that that squirrel was not in a life-threatening position. And so when they're done with their meal, he asks what went wrong. The apprentice says, I was starving. I was too hungry, and so were you. And the two men get in a pretty heated argument about their role within the forest and the agreement that they've made with the forest to only take the animals that they couldn't save, and how this was a breaking of the trust and the agreement that they had made. Eventually, they, without resolving their tension, notice that the sun is getting way too low to be safe. And with a little more strength in their body, they start to rapidly head back to their cabins. When they're just about back, they stumble across a rabbit. A very similar predicament as the squirrel, front leg captured. They pry the trap off, and as they do, the rabbit scrambles into some thorn bush. When you feel ready, let's bring the knees back to neutral. Set your hips back to neutral, and then let the bottoms of the feet come together and the knees fall out wide for one final physical reset of the body.
when it feels right, when it feels appropriate, the knees come back to neutral. And as the knees come back to neutral, ask yourself if there is anything you might want, need, desire, benefit from prior to Shavasana. And if there is, offer that for yourself. If you're ready for some physical stillness, you can offer that as well. Eventually, we'll find our way into that stillness and we'll settle in for final shape of our practice tonight. So as this rabbit limps off and gets into this thorn bush and the sun is now almost completely set, this pioneer looks at the apprentice and says, if we hadn't consumed that squirrel, if we hadn't argued over that squirrel, we could have saved this rabbit tonight. As it is, we're going to have to go to bed and wait until the morning and hope the rabbit's still here. And he looks down, you can see the rabbit, and he's like, gonna make it through the night. And he lets the apprentice know one final time that he's disgusted in his choice and angry at him. And then the two men separate and go to bed. Just finding your position of stillness tonight.
Two men wake up early the next morning. And when they step outside, they find the raven pecking the innards of this wounded rabbit. The frontiersman calls the raven over. It comes and lands on his shoulder, and frontiersman is talking to the raven and apologizing to it. They'd forgotten to give it the squirrel's tail the night before. And the apprentice comes up to the frontiersman, and he's just up in arms about how unfair it is that he's treating this raven with so much kindness when it killed this rabbit. And he did the same thing to a squirrel the day before that fed them both. And he got reprimanded. Start to bring some movement to our fingers and our toes. Into our wrists and up into our ankles. Carrying on up the arm into the elbows, up the leg into the knees. Up to your shoulders and your hips. To your neck and your head. Your jaw, your eyes, your tongue, all move. Eventually, the entire body moves. And we use that full body mobility to work our way back up into seat. In our seated space, spine gets tall, breath gets fluid, eyes close. And the frontiersman looks back at the apprentice and he says, "There's a difference between you and the raven that's of vital importance. The raven is programmed when it sees a wounded animal, genetically programmed to eat. You as a human being have a conscious choice to make." With our next inhale, we'll bring our hands together, heart center. Over the course of the next 7 days, can you ensure you are flexing your human capacity for conscious decision making? And see how that impacts your experience. Thank you so much for being a part of tonight's practice and for being you. Namaste. Happy Monday. Appreciate the heck out of you guys being here. Love the heck out of you. Like I said yesterday, I am hoping to be up and running as usual this Sunday and Monday, but I'm not 100% sure on the internet situation moving this weekend. So I will keep you posted, but I'm going to do everything I can to make that happen. So I love you. Have a beautiful rest of your week, and I will see you very soon. Mwah.